Hello everyone. The title of today's lecture is C++ Help, Installing and Configuring Code Blocks in Windows 7. I'm your host, Rex Jerry. I'm a Linux expert. I'm also a C++ programmer. I'm a Drupal and PHP expert. I've been an avid user of code blocks for several years. I use it mainly on Linux, but also use it on Windows 7. I'm the owner of jerry.com, that's DJERE.com, which is a website where I write about Linux, free software, and other free software topics. I'm also a staff writer at beginlinux.com. I write a weekly Linux article called the Linux Week in Review. Okay, today's objectives, we're going to learn about code blocks. We're going to learn about MinGW and why you need it. We'll compare the advantages and disadvantages of running code blocks in a Linux and Windows environment. We'll learn to install and configure code blocks and MinGW on a Windows 7 system. Okay, CodeBlocks is a free C++ integrated development environment. It is free software, open source, and it's licensed under version 3 of GNU's GPL license. CodeBlocks is cross-platform. It's been compiled, and it'll run on Linux, Mac, and Windows. It does need the MinGW minimalist GNU environment to compile C++ code on Windows 7 if you want to use a GCC compiler. Okay, MinGW is short for the minimalist GNU for Windows. It's a native port of the GNU GCC compiler to Windows that was released back in 1998. It is free software licensed under GNU's GPL license. And if you want to use a GCC compiler, which is the most popular compiler because it's free, you'll have to install MinGW to get code blocks to compile correctly. All right, a brief history lesson. Linux is a free operating system. It's a free software operating system that was created by a college student named Linus Torvalds back in 1991. When he created Linux, he had a Linux kernel, which is kind of like the fundamental part of the operating system, but he didn't have any software to run on top of that. So what he did was he got with a guy named Richard Stallman, who was the head of a foundation called the Free Software Foundation. The Free Software Foundation made free software licensed under GNU's GPL license. It was freely available. You could download it, reuse it, change it, do anything you wanted to with it. So Richard Stallman had a bunch of software, but no operating system kernel. Linus Torvalds had an operating system kernel with no software. So the two combined, and that's where the GNU Linux software suite came from. Linux was the kernel, GNU provided the software, like Office suites and video editing software, all that kind of stuff. So in 1998, another software developer ported GCC, the GNU compiler, over to the Windows side. That suite of software that Richard Stallman provided for Linux included that GCC compiler. So that GCC compiler has been around since, at least the 80s, 90s, and then in 1998 it was ported over to Windows. That's what we'll be using today to actually compile our C++ code. Okay, the difference between code blocks running it in a Linux environment and a Windows environment. Because of the fact that GCC was one of those native Linux/Unix programs, CodeBlocks runs a little bit more natively on Linux. That's because most Linux distributions have GCC already installed. So pretty much all you do is install CodeBlocks. GCC is already configured. You just compile your code and go. No setup required. On Windows, GCC is not native. It was ported over. So on Windows, CodeBlocks doesn't feel quite as native as it does. It works the same, but you've got to do a little bit more configuration to get your compilation up and running on a Windows system. Okay, so enough of the explanation. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is I use Firefox as my browser. There's two websites you're going to need. You're going to need codeblocks.org and you're going to need sourceforge.net. On codeblocks.org, we're going to go ahead and download the latest version of CodeBlocks, which is 10.05. So I'll go to the downloads here in the left-hand menu. Now, what I want is, you'll see there's three versions. There's the binaries, the source, and the SVN version. The source code is available if you're a programmer and you want to edit the CodeBlocks code. The CodeBlocks source code before you install it. What we want is the pre-compiled binaries for Windows 7. So I'm going to click on binaries. Okay, you'll see that there's Windows, Linux 32-bit, Linux 64-bit, and Mac OS binaries. We want the Windows 2000 XP Vista ones. Okay, so there's two. There's CodeBlocks 10.05 setup.exe, and this CodeBlocks 10.05 MinGW setup.exe. So we could actually download both the setup program and MinGW from here, but what I do is I download the latest version of MinGW from sourceforge.net instead of downloading this one that might be a little bit more out of date. So we're going to go ahead and download CodeBlocks-10.05-setup.exe, and I'm going to do it from SourceForge. When I click on that SourceForge link, it takes me directly to the SourceForge download page. Just make sure you're downloading CodeBlocks, which you should be. Okay, there we go. CodeBlocks-10.05-setup.exe. I'm going to go ahead and save that file, 22.2 megabytes. Okay, there we go. Mine is -1 because I've actually downloaded it before when I was prepping for this demo. So let's go ahead and right click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and open. Okay, publishers unknown, that's fine. CodeBlocks-10.05-setup.exe. Yes. So there you go. You see the little CodeBlocks logo. Go ahead and click next. Okay, that's giving you a license, GNU General Public License version 3 from June 29, 2007. That's fine. I agree. Okay, don't change anything. Default install is fine. Okay, notice where it's going. Now, CodeBlocks for Windows is a 32-bit program. So 32-bit programs go into your C program files x86 directory, and it's going to be installed in /CodeBlocks. So go ahead and install. It's very important that you install it there because CodeBlocks makes certain assumptions about where it is, and if you install it somewhere else, it'll make it harder to find some other things that it usually finds automatically. And I'll show you that in a second. Now, I don't want to run CodeBlocks right now. We'll go ahead and say no. We'll come back to it later, and then hit next, and we're finished. Okay, go ahead and close this out. Okay, so now we're done with the CodeBlocks download. So now let's go to SourceForge itself. So now we're on sourceforge.net. We're going to search for MinGW and hit search. Okay, the version we're going to want is the one at the very top, MinGW, Minimalist GNU for Windows. Download. You'll notice that it's probably pretty popular. Like this week, there's been over almost 1 million downloads and 705 recommendations. And then notice it says MinGW-git-inst-2011-1118. So that's a pretty recent version, about a week ago. Download. When you click on that download link, it'll take you directly to the MinGW download page. Notice that it says MinGW Minimalist GNU for Windows at top. Okay, here's the file we're going to download, MinGW-git-inst-2011-1118, which is for me about 8 days ago. So we'll hit save file. Pretty small file. It's only 578K. Again, mine says parentheses 2 because I've downloaded a couple of times as I practiced this earlier. Okay, go ahead and click open and run. Okay, publishers unknown, that's fine. I trust SourceForge. I'll hit yes. Okay, hit next and hit next. Okay, that's fine. What I'm going to use the pre-packaged repository catalogs. They're pretty recent, only a few days ago. Hit next. Okay, this is just a license again. MinGW is licensed under GNU General Public License version 3. I'm going to accept my license and hit next. Okay, now you have to remember where it gets installed. That's very important for setting up CodeBlocks. So it's installed in the C:\MinGW directory. I'll leave it there, leave it as default. Next. It already exists because I installed it before. That's fine. Next. Okay, now this is very important. You want to have C++ compiler support. So you want to go ahead and check C++ compiler also. C is fine. I write both C and C++ code, so for me I'm going to select both. If you only want to do C++ code, you could uncheck the C compiler, but I'm going to leave it both for mine and hit next. Okay, there we go. I'm not going to display the git log. I don't need that right now, so I'll uncheck that and I'll click finish. So now MinGW is installed. Let's close this out. We'll go ahead and close our browser out. So now I'll come and actually run CodeBlocks. So if I go to all programs, CodeBlocks, and run CodeBlocks. Okay, there we go. You notice CodeBlocks 10.05 is starting up. So the first thing I want to check is I want to check to make sure that it can actually recognize MinGW and GCC that I just installed. So I'm going to go to Settings, Compiler and Debugger, and I'm going to go to this tab that says Toolchain Executables. Now what the toolchain is basically all the programs that it needs to run to compile. So right now you'll see that it's set to C MinGW as our compiler installation directory. That's correct. If this had been wrong, you could hit auto detect and it would detect it, but it's already right. So this is where it's looking for the file C:\MinGW, and then these are all the individual programs that it's using. Now you remember I said GCC. The part of GCC that does C++ compilation is called G++. So that makes sense. MinGW, we're using the 32-bit version. MinGW 32-G++, that's the C++ compiler, -exe. You'll notice for the C compiler it says MinGW 32-gcc.exe because GCC stands for GC compiler. So it all makes sense. So everything is set up. We have debugging, we have static libraries, we have the make program to actually make programs. So everything is set up correctly. So now we should be able to test it. We should be able to actually open up a C++ program and run it here. So I already have one that I already made. So it's on my desktop. I'm going to open, and there's a program I made called simpledemo.cpp. We'll go ahead and open that up. So here's our simple program. This is a simple code blocks demo program written by RexJerry of jerry.com. We have all our parts of a C++ program we need. We have the include IO stream because this is going to output a stream to the screen. We're using our standard namespace, and then we have our main function right here. Now this is a simple program. All it'll do is it'll run a main function that outputs the message to the screen. This is my very first C++ program. And then like all C++ programs, the main function will end by returning 0. So to compile it, all we're going to do is we're going to go to build and run. Now you'll notice there it's compiling simpledemo.cpp, and there we go. This is my very first C++ program. Return 0, press any key to continue, or hit enter, and it's done. So in review, let's go back to our lecture here. We learned about code blocks. We learned about MinGW. We compared the advantages and disadvantages of running code blocks in a Linux versus Windows environment. We learned how to install, We learned how to install and configure code blocks in MinGW on a Windows 7 system. Goodbye everybody, and thank you very much for watching.